The earth was without form and void, and the darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Then God said, Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament, and the divided waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Then God said, Let the water under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, and the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw it was good. And so the evening and the morning were the third day. Then God said, Let there be lights in the firmament, and the heavens to divide the day from the night. And let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens, to give light on the earth. And it was so. Then God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. God set this in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Then God said, Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the face of the firmament of the heavens. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that moves, with which the waters were abound, according to their kind, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. So the evening and the morning were the fifth day. Then God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature according to its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beast of the earth, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our own image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female. He created them. Then God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields to seed. To you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so. Then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day.
Thank you. Now that wasn't quite as impromptu as it looked. I warned him that time. Now there's an old argument which says that God certainly could not have made all of this in just 6 days. Couldn't have done it. Well, flash ahead several thousand years to just a few years ago, and this lie was told. It all just happened. It just happened. Life just spontaneously sprang out of mud or goop. Well, go back to the 1950s. Some of us were alive then. And I can remember this, when they broached this idea of evolution, it just happened. And scientists heard that, and one of them replied, yeah, if the earth was millions or millions of years old, and everybody laughed. Everybody laughed. It was such a silly idea. Well, the outcome of that, and the reality is that even if the earth was billions of years old, if all of that had gone on, it still couldn't have happened. And back around the mid-1950s, when they started telling this fable, everybody knew that the earth is between 10 and 6,000 years old. We have history that tells us that. All of the evidence points to that. I'm not going to go into the evidence now, but if you want to, and I've done a thing on this, I'd be happy to do it with you. The evidence says that that is how old the earth is. But here's the essence of the argument. How long would it take God to make the earth if he decided to make it? 6 days? How about 6 seconds? When the earth is going to be destroyed, the Bible says it's going to happen in the twinkling of an eye. God doesn't even have to do this. It's gone. When he just thinks it and speaks the word, it's gone. He didn't need to take 6 days. So why did he? Because as he was making the earth, he invented something else, didn't he? The 7-day week. While God was making the earth, he invented and created the 7-day week. He gave it to us as a bonus. Now, he spoke everything into existence, except when it came down to the final thing that God decided to make, he decided he was going to get his hands dirty in making us. We are handmade in God's image. That is why mankind is so special. Out of all of the life that is on this planet, mankind is the most special. Any of you ever watched the Nature Channel on television? They've got this thing that pops up on the screen all the time, and they have a voice that comes on behind there, and they'll show something, and they'll say, surprisingly human. Ever heard that? It's on the Nature Channel all the time. I just think it's something that all of these things they'll show, and what they want it to be is human. Well, there's only one human species. And why is the human species so special? Why is it that everything else wants to be called human? Because human beings are handmade in God's own image. That's the first thing. Next thing, do you ever think about shelf life? Anybody ever heard this? How do you tell if sour cream goes bad? You know, do we think about shelf life? Sure we do. We even think about honey, which is so magical because it's the one food source that never spoils. Do we think about that? Sure we do. Shelf life. How long did it take for Adam and Eve, who were put in paradise, how long did it take them to break that one rule that they had? Out of all that they had to eat from, all of those trees that they had to pick fruit from, how long did it take for them to decide to pick that orange and peel it? Yeah, I decided to give the apple a day off. Everybody always picks on the apple because nobody knows for sure, so I just, for today, chose the orange. This is not in the Bible. Don't quote me on this and say that Bill said it's in the Bible, because it's not. It's a legend. It's a legend, a tradition that was clear back as far as I can trace it. So it's at least as old as Abraham, and probably older. But the legend is that from creation to the sin of Adam and Eve took 40 days. Makes sense, you know, you get a new job, the trial period is usually 40 or 90 days, you know. So 40 days is as good as any. But then how many generations did it take for their kids to go bad? Do you ever think about this? Yeah. You know, we go to weddings all the time, and there's that perfect couple. They look just like the little things that are on top of the wedding cake, the little figures. I mean, this couple is so beautiful. All of their wedding pictures, not a hair out of place. And they get all the shots in the wedding pictures that everybody wants to take, even the ones of their hands, you know, or their wedding rings. Oh, it's just perfect. And how long is it until they're making excuses for their children? Right? And everybody's ready to pounce on that. Yeah, they were the perfect couple. And look at how their kids. Yeah, we talk about that. How long did it take for Adam and Eve? I don't know exactly how they had their children in what order, but here's what we do know, that apparently Cain was the first one, but he was certainly the first son. And he was the first one to break the mold. You know, we do our best in raising our children. We do. We try to set a Christian example. We try to lay God out for them, give them the opportunity to learn about Him. But how many generations can we guarantee are going to be faithful to the Word of God? How many? Really none. You know? We do our best to stay true. But read the Bible and see, as you do, what the consequences are. I want to introduce the next fact of the Bible with a story. My wife and I were sitting down doing our estate planning, that living trust, you know, and the lawyer, who's from Indianapolis, was sitting across the desk from us, and he told us this story that I might have told a couple of you. He was the one, you know, gets the people all together, the family, to read the will. And enough time had gone by that he had the checks to hand out from the estate. So he had the family there gathered, and he read the will and he handed out the checks. Well, one of the grandsons, who was about 20 years old, grabbed his check, ran to the bank, and cashed it. Went down then from there to the new car dealership in Indianapolis and bought himself a new four-wheel drive pickup truck. Well, this is what a few years ago, and the way the laws were, because he paid cash, he didn't have to show proof of insurance. They slapped that cardboard temporary plate on there, and away he went. Right down to the gravel pit. Drove that thing in there, put it in four-wheel drive, and went shooting up that dirt hill. Well, about 2/3 of the way up, the truck ran out of momentum and did this number down to the bottom of the hill. 90 minutes from the time he got that inheritance, it lay at the bottom of the hill in a crumpled and crushed bunch of twisted metal. You ever heard a story like that? That was a true story that lawyer told us. And that is what Adam and Eve's family looked like pretty quick. You got your Bibles there. Just flip over a couple of pages to chapter 6. So we're going to start with verse 5. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he made man on the earth, and was grieved in his heart. So the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. Now remember, many people call this good versus evil, but that's not what happened. What's happening? Instead, we see that from the very first, evil set out to beat out the good. And by this point, the devil thought that he had won. Out of all of the people on the earth, he had everybody in his grasp except for one family. Wow! Was he happy with himself. And he had big plans, you can be sure, of how he was going to get rid of that last family, Noah's family. You know, we don't even have to use our imaginations here. This is stuff we see all the time. What would he do? He would just send some pretty girls to lure Noah's sons away from their wives. Maybe he would break up Noah's marriage. You know, this is stuff we see happening. And then what else? It's recorded right there in the Bible. Just get Noah's neighbors and friends to ridicule him, call him silly. Yeah, we'll get on that boat with you. No, he won't. He's an idiot. You know? It's right there. You can read it in the Bible. Use peer pressure. Use whatever tactic would work. We only have one family left to rule. That was the state of the earth. But it never fazed God. Notice that. It never fazed him. Here's an argument. I mentioned this before, which was, how did Noah get all of those animals on that ark? Was the ark big enough? Wrong question. You can check this out. Go to the same resource I did. These people down there at the Creation Museum that want to build that replica of the ark just a couple of miles away. You can check with them. According to them, I haven't done the research, But according to their calculations, the ark, when it floated off, was at least half empty, maybe more. It had more space in it than was necessary. There were a lot of empty places, and it wasn't for the unicorn that didn't get on board, according to the legend. There was room for hundreds of people. Why weren't they on there? Because they didn't believe, did they? And they perished in the flood. You see, when the game was announced, evil versus good, and the two teams lined up, God's team was pretty small, wasn't it? The rest of the population of the earth against 8 people. And notice something else about Noah. When you look at him as you're reading through the Bible, notice that Noah was focused on one thing. Now, this isn't hard. If you check and read the Bible, I get the impression, and this is an opinion, and I could easily be wrong. If you want to show me something that shows I'm wrong, I'm all for it. But I think it was quite easy, if Noah wanted to, that he could go over and look at Eden. He could go over to the entrance to the Garden of Eden where the angel guarded it and see maybe where it was all grown up with weeds and so on and so forth. He could do that. And think about it. He could think about Adam and Eve. They had paradise. They had paradise. Why would they want anything else? Why would they want anything else? Look at Noah. He had 3 sons. And in this wicked and awful world that he was surrounded with, God had blessed those three sons with 3 very good wives that came out of what kind of homes? The Bible just told us. They came out of bad homes, and yet his 3 boys, which they had done their best to raise as good sons, got 3 good wives. Noah was pretty content, wasn't he? He had every reason to be. And you know what? When he bowed his knee and prayed, when he thought about it, he had contentment. He was happy the way he was. And he was thankful to God. So right there we have a goal that we can set for ourselves. We're barely into the Bible, just into the first several chapters here, and yet we have an example that we can use. And that is, we need to be people like Noah who could be content. You know? When the devil comes at us in evil versus good, we can use the words that are in God's Bible in the book of Jude. The Lord rebuke you. Because what God has provided for us, we can actually say, is just fine. Paul put it this way: I have learned in whatever state I am in to be content. Again, we haven't been at this very long, just into the first few chapters of the Bible, but we have learned that one of the greatest weapons that we can use against the devil is contentment. To be content in what God has given us. Now, we can read ahead. The reason I'm going through the Bible is I want to pick up as we go through. Remember, there are 3 main topics in the Bible, right? Somebody's coming, somebody's here, and somebody's coming back. Who is that somebody? Jesus. Absolutely. And what he shows us in the Old Testament are the pictures of what's coming. And I just want to give some of these as we go quickly through the Bible. What was it that started all of the problems in the earth? What was it? It was the lack of using that weapon of contentment. And then look at Cain, you know, the first son. It was the decisions that he had made which brought hardship upon who? Upon him, upon his grandchildren, and so forth. And when we see this, the earth got worse and worse and worse as they neglected worshiping our Creator. But let's not forget the whole point of being alive. The whole point for us being here and being handmade by God is not so that we can indulge in whatever we want to do and going from one party to the next, one thing that stimulates our senses to the next. That's not what we're here for. But what do we hear from people? You ever heard this one? I don't need to go to church. How many of you have ever heard that? I don't need to go to to church. And you know what? They're right. You don't. You don't need to go to church. You can have a job. You can get married or have something similar. You can go about your life and you can live. You can do that. But check out the consequences. Check out the consequences. When we live without worship and adoration of God in our lives, the one who created us for the purpose of fellowshipping with Him, if we don't live and worship Him here, we're not going to live and worship with Him in the hereafter. It's not going to happen. Now, after the great flood, the earth recovered. It wasn't the same. The Bible tells us, and history and archaeology back this up, that before the flood, the people on the earth lived to be between 800 and 1,000 years old. That was their normal lifespan. But keep reading. I want you to read the Bible. Keep reading. Start in Genesis 1 and just read. And when you get to those big long lists of names and peoples and numbers, just buzz them and go on. But look at what happened. Abraham had a son who was Isaac. Isaac had 2 boys, Jacob and Esau. Jacob had 12 boys, right? And when Jacob got to Egypt, so we're not talking very long here. We're only talking maybe 300 years is all after the flood. When Jacob got to Egypt and stood in front of Pharaoh, Pharaoh said to him, "How old are you?" He said, "You look old. You look older than Norman Bone." And he was. Jacob was 140 years old. And Pharaoh went, "Whoa, 140 years old? That's incredible." Was it? Was it? It was only 300 years after the flood. You know, the sons of Noah had just barely died. But in only 300 years, we went from living to be 1,000 to living to be less than 100. Anybody who was 140 years old? Wow, that was something. You see, there's a word picture that God paints for us here. A second destruction of this world is coming. It's coming. This second time, God isn't going to just wash the earth like He did before. He's going to incinerate it. He's going to speak the word, and it's going to burn up in the twinkling of an eye. When that happens, there are going to be 2 realms left, paradise and punishment. And there again is just going to be one family that's going to survive. Just like then, there's going to be one family that's going to survive. And this time it's going to be the Christian family. That's the one that will survive. And those who survive are going to have something very definite in common with Noah. They will have survival through water. Won't we? What's that water called? Absolutely. The flood is the first picture in the Bible of Christian baptism. The second thing that we'll have common in common with Noah is that we will have lived a righteous life. Perfect? No. But righteous. Doing everything we can to live in honor and glory of our Creator. Just like the prayer opens, "Our Father who art in heaven, holy, hallowed, worshipped be your name." That's how we live. It takes both. It takes the water and it takes the Christian life. And yet, just like Adam and Eve, and just like Cain, living a contented life isn't good enough for a lot of people. It never has been. Just like those people before the flood, just like the descendants of Noah, people want to party and they want to indulge in whatever tickles their fancy. Our message as Christians is very simple. Would you like to experience what Adam and Eve threw away for a piece of fruit? Would you like to have a rich and fulfilled life, or you want to follow the example of Esau and throw it away for a bowl of bean soup? Do you want to live with the angels as your servants in the presence of God as the guest at His dining table? Is that how you want to spend eternity? You see, the picture of the flood is a picture of cleansing. And it's a picture of Christian baptism. The ark is a picture of what happened there. It wasn't the water that did the cleansing. It's God who provides the means of salvation. Because there's nothing special about the water, and there's everything special about God. If people today will come to Him for salvation and go through the waters of baptism, then just like Noah, they'll have salvation. And they can be content, because if He's not in you, if His Holy Spirit's not in you, there's no way you're going to be content with this life. You're going to chase everything else instead. Now here's what I don't know. I don't know how many people in this room haven't done that yet. I don't know. And no, there's not going to be a voice come out of the ceiling and tell me like they do on television. That's not going to happen. But if you need to take that step today, I invite you to come. And if you have taken that step, I hope that this little review this morning, as we have just zipped through the opening chapters of the Bible, will remind you to take it and offer it, just like Noah offered it to his neighbors. Salvation awaits. Won't you take advantage of it? We're going to sing a song. It's number 494 in your book. It took a miracle. Creation was a miracle. Salvation's a miracle. You want it in your life, accept the miracle. Won't you come as we stand?